So I wanted to read a few paragraphs from William Irwin Thompson's book, The Time Falling Bodies Take to Light, about the relationship between science and myth. So, why does the human have far more of a brain than it needs for survival? And why, for that matter, if survival is the name of the game, did not the baboons invent a language, since they too had lived in the open and dangerous savannah? To explain all these puzzling questions, anthropologists resort to their own peculiar brand of popular mythology and science fiction. Richard Leakey and Roger Lewin, two anthropologists, have written the following. The evolutionary momentum that propelled Homo erectus toward Homo sapiens must have left behind some pockets of erectus and have caused some sapien populations to move down biological blind alleys to their own extinction. Joining Neanderthal man on his ill-fated journey were also Solo man and Rhodesia man, both of whom likewise paid the penalty of over-specialization. End quote. What in terms of science evolutionary momentum is, I really don't know. As a writer, I recognize a metaphor when I see one, but if evolutionary momentum is a metaphor, does that mean that extinction and over-specialization are also metaphors? Can it be that Solo man and Rhodesia man are not really species, but metonymies constructed out of a few fragments of bone? And what is extinction? Did the Romans become extinct because they were over-specialized, or because they were eliminated by evolutionarily superior beings in the barbarian invasions? And why should Neanderthal man pass into extinction when he had an even larger brain than ours? If for millions of years hominids with lesser endowments were managing to survive, why should Neanderthal man suddenly become subject to over-specialization? Finally, what does it mean when the anthropologist says that Cro-Magnon man suddenly appeared on the scene? Clearly, the account of human origins in anthropology is a fictionalized narrative in which the gaps between half a skull here and one or two teeth there are filled in with projections, unconscious assumptions, and scientistic mythology. I do not object to scientific myths, for they are useful in holding together a conglomeration of scientific theories. But I do object to the fact that most scientists reject mythopoeic thought. With such an unconscious myth of progress as the ground of one's consciousness, and a few teeth or half a skull as the figure of one's perceptions, it is easy to connect the dots in graphing a single curve for the arc of human evolution. The glue that holds the scientific facts together are the metaphors like over-specialization, blind alleys, and evolutionary momentum. If the modern biologist were to use poetic metaphors like Henry Bergson's Elan Vital, his colleagues would cringe in disgust at the appearance of mysticism in a scientific discourse. And yet Richard Leakey's evolutionary momentum is Bergson's creative evolution renamed. So what Thompson is really trying to show here is that mythology is not something that we can ever escape. And what a myth is really a metaphor that answers certain questions like, who am I? How did I get here? How did we get here? What is the meaning of life? All of these questions can only be answered with metaphorical sorts of poetic expressions. And those expressions have meaning by virtue of the fact that they somehow line up with our experience. Because when we read, say, if you're a Christian, the myth of Genesis, or if you are a Hindu and you read the Upanishads, or the Vedas, or if you are reading about the life of Buddha, if you're a Buddhist, you're trying to reenact an archetypal story. You're not trying to believe in a story. I mean, that could be some kind of it's a poor religion when you're just reading the stories in order to believe that they happened to someone else. I think the real point of these myths is to participate in them and to be moved by them on an experiential level. Otherwise, you're just You're not really opening yourself to the true meaning of these things. And that, science is really the most advanced, the most particular, the most detailed and observant type of mythological worldview that human beings have ever constructed. But its answers are always still these metaphors that we have to learn to experience in order for them to be true.